Howdy. Yeah, that's fun for me. I don't get to do that very often. My name is Jen, and I graduated from Texas A&M in 1991. That was a super long time ago, and I want you to know that when I was here at A&M, I was involved in fish camp, and oh yeah, go ahead and whoop it up for that a little bit. That was a little, should we try again? I was involved in fish camp. Okay. And my roommate, Connie, introduced me to her DG partner one day, and his name was Greg Mott. And Greg started a Bible study. I didn't even know he was a Christian when I met him. And he started this Bible study, and so we thought it would be rude not to go. So we went to Breakaway when it used to meet at the community center, which I don't even know if it's still there over on George Bush. And there were about 45 people who would come. And we would pray. We would pray that there would be revival on this campus. And you know what I didn't know? I didn't know that I was praying for you. I didn't know that I was praying for my own kids who were going to attend this school. And so I am so grateful to see the work that Breakaway is doing and to get to be a part of it. This is hands down my favorite thing to speak at. And good grief, I'm a tall person, and this music stand is not cutting it at the height that it is at. So it's really, really fun to get to come back to Aggie Land. Some of my children are here tonight. One of them overheard someone talking about me speaking here tonight and was like, "It's weird when your mom is the speaker at Breakaway." So she's had an odd Tuesday. We are going to be talking about why the Bible hasn't fixed your self-esteem issues. Probably not relevant because nobody in here has them, right? Self-esteem issues. And what I need you to know before I start into the teaching tonight is that I am not an inspirational speaker. And that's not a knock on inspirational speakers. It's just that I'm not one, and if you think you're getting that and then you get me, it can be a little bit of a hard right turn. I am a Bible teacher, and so what I do is I pull truths out of the scripture and try to help others understand them. So just keep that in mind. Not an inspirational speaker, Bible teacher, and with that in view, I'm going to teach the Bible tonight. Is that cool with everybody? All right, so why has the Bible not fixed your self-esteem issues? Well, I am here to reassure you that not only is this an issue that is relevant to this room, but it seems to be relevant to just about every room of women that I address, no matter their age. And so if I were to tell you the number one topic that churches or conferences call me and ask me to address, it would be identity. Who am I? That is the question that everyone is asking. Women in particular are asking this who am I question like crazy. And there are a lot of people who are willing to give you answers to that question, even within the Christian world. So I know at A&M you have that you call it the Christian bubble, right? Well, I am here to tell you some scary news. In addition to the Christian bubble, there is a subset that I refer to as the pink Christian bubble. And it is a place where women who are in the Christian bubble are spoken to and marketed to in ways that are telling them things that are not necessarily of lasting value. Let's see if you've heard some of them. Girl, you are a precious daughter of the King. Girl, I see you. I see you. You are loved. You are known. Now, are these wrong messages? No, they're not wrong messages, but they become what we talk about almost incessantly. There's a song, actually, that was just released fairly recently by Lauren Daigle, and I want you to know, I don't hate the song. I actually think it's a decent song, but it crossed over from the Christian market into the secular market, and then it just went bananas. Do you know which song I'm talking about? Yeah, and so the sort of the key line in the song is, the only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. True or false? I mean, it's a song, so, we can give it a little bit of room to live in. But the whole point of the song is that she says, I believe what you say of me. And if you were to sit down and look at the lyrics, because I did, because this is what I do in my free time, because I do not have hobbies. In this song, which lasts 4 minutes and 31 seconds, there are 18 I am statements. I am statements. None of them refers to God. They all refer to me. Not only that, but the words I, me, my, and mine occur 59 times in a song that is 4 minutes and 31 seconds long. Is it any wonder that this song appealed to more than just the Christian pink bubble, but appealed to the whole world? Because what does the whole world want to talk about? Me. Anybody in here into the Enneagram? You're like, oh, hey, that's a little too close. I don't hate the Enneagram. Well, I kind of hated it when I heard what my number was, but I'm assuming we all had that experience, right? You're like, oh, which one am I? Oh, the one where I feel intense shame? Yeah, good. Good. So I don't know what your background is in the church, but I can tell you a little bit about mine. I hope it will help you understand why the message that I want to talk to you about tonight is important to me. I grew up with a vision of God where God was a little bit needy. He was just a little needy. I mean, I was told things like that he created me because if I had not been created, he would have been lonely. He would have had a little me-shaped hole in his heart. Like, no one said it quite that way, but that was the general idea. And not only that, but I grew up with a God who could be manipulated. Like if I prayed in Jesus' name, or if I prayed hedge of protection, there were certain code words that I could pray that would then, that would make God do what I wanted him to do. Or if I gathered 2 or 3, right? There were all of these things that I could do where if I did them just right, God could be manipulated or controlled. Not only that, but God required my faith before he could act. Like if I didn't have enough faith, poor God, seated and thrown between the cherubim, had to wait until I could muster it before he could do what it was that he wanted to do. And he was a God who concealed his will for my life, and he required that I labor to discover it. Now, I grew up with a small vision of God. A small vision of God, and it wasn't until I was older that I began to understand that there was more to God than Abba Daddy God on whose lap I snuggle. Anybody come across this concept at all? That he's your Abba Daddy? Do you love it or hate it? So don't tell me. Let's just keep going. And everywhere I go, I live my life at women's events. It's these kinds of messages. Girl, you. You are enough, girl. You are worthy, girl. On and on and on. Why do we have to keep saying it? Like, why isn't it sticking? And then there's this one verse that we love more than all the other verses. Psalm 139:14. You're already laughing. I haven't even quoted it. Because you know, it is the self-esteem verse, isn't it? Like, you've been through the holidays, you ate every piece of pie you could find, and you're wearing the yoga pants, even though there were all those blog posts that said that the devil makes yoga pants. And you're standing in front of the mirror and you're speaking it like an incantation over yourself. Fearfully and wonderfully made, fearfully and wonderfully made, fearfully and wonderfully made. So I spoke at this conference about a few years back, and there were probably 3,000 women at this conference. It was, I don't want to tell you where it was because you could probably Google it, but anyway, it was a big conference, and I was not one of the keynote speakers. I was doing a little thing on Bible literacy over in a room over to the side, but they would have us come attend the main sessions, and they have seating always at the front for the speakers, and so you're right down there at the front, and so it was a 3-session thing. So Friday night, we go into the big room, and one of the keynote speakers stands up, and she stood up, and she had 45 minutes, and she took us to Psalm 139:14, and she sort of like got us there through the first 13 verses, and then she assured us that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, that we were precious to God. Girl. It was very moving. Everyone was into it. It was fine. We all went to bed that night, came back the next morning. Another speaker got up for the first session in the morning, and I guess she had not talked to the woman from the night before. I don't know. Or maybe she just thought we had forgotten, because guess where she took us? Psalm 139:14. And we spent another 45 minutes being told how fearfully and wonderfully made we were again. So then we go to our seminars, we go to lunch, we come back for the afternoon session. And it's a third speaker. Anyone want to guess? Psalm 139:14. It was mind-blowing. And so we go through the whole lesson, and I got to say, the room was still kind of with her, and then she had a big finish at the end. She gets to the end, and remember, I'm down at the front, and she says, okay, now everyone, I want you to put your hands in the air. Now here's where you need to know something about me. I actually have a little charismatic baggage from my earlier days. And so if you tell me to put my hands in the air, I am not putting my hands in the air. But if I want to put my hands in the air, I will put my hands in the air, but you do not tell me to put my hands in the air. Problem is, I'm on the front row, everyone can see me. So I'm like, oh, shoot. And I looked a little more like I was under arrest than about to engage in any kind of worship. But she was not done. Then she says, I want you to place your hands, and I kid you not, on your uterus. And speak a blessing over it. So I would like us all to, no, I'm kidding. Three alarming thoughts passed through my head in rapid succession. First, it had been a very long session, and if I was going to pray for anything in that general region, it was going to be my bladder. Second, it was a little bit of an older crowd. I was not sure we all still had one. Third, and I gotta be honest, this is the one that keeps me up at night. What on earth is the corresponding blessing at the men's conference? Anybody watch The Princess Bride? You keep okay, I have so much hope in the next generation. You know, I keep saying, you keep saying that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. We keep saying that verse. I do not think it means what we think it means. But more than that, I think that we may have misdiagnosed our primary problem. We may have misdiagnosed our primary problem. Anybody in here studying health or medicine or anything like that? So my father-in-law, a few months back, was having a lot of trouble with what he believed was heartburn, and so he was taking a lot of antacids. And it was several days after this bout of heartburn that he discovered he had actually had a mild heart attack. So what was he doing? He's okay, by the way. Sorry to sound the alarm. What was he doing? He was treating a symptom, but he was not treating the underlying cause, which was actually very dangerous. And I believe that this is what we are doing with these self-esteem messages that we have brought into the pink Christian bubble. We are treating the symptom, which is our self-esteem issues, but we are not getting to the root of the problem. We have misdiagnosed our primary problem, I believe. It is not that we lack self-esteem, it is that we lack awe. A-W-E, awe. You know what awe is, right? This is that thing that is transcendent. It is that moment. It is why when you saw, I hope that you were paying attention yesterday, Notre Dame, when you saw that steeple fall, you felt a sickening feeling inside of you because that was a building that inspired what? Awe. It drew our eyes upward. I think our problem is not that we lack self-esteem, but that we lack awe. So there are people who actually research awe for a living. Dr. Piff and Dr. Keltner have done extensive work in this field, and this is an article from the New York Times that talks about the way that mammals experience awe. And it says this: here's a curious fact about goosebumps. In many non-human mammals, goosebumps, that physiological reaction in which the muscles surrounding hair follicles contract, occur when individuals, along with other members of their species, face a threat. Okay, so this means that my adorable pug Peggy, if she is afraid, will experience goosebumps. I can't see them because she's super fat and has a ton of fur, but we will assume for the sake of argument that this is what happens when she is afraid. We humans, they say by contrast, can get goosebumps when we experience awe, that often positive feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends our understanding of the world. So you know this. This is like when you listen to a piece of beautiful music, or when you're out in nature, or when you see a piece of art, or when you hear the Aggie War hymn. What happens? you get those goosebumps on your arm. You don't have to be threatened with a life or death situation to have that happen. It can be because you understand some sense of the transcendent that you have this reaction. And what they have found in their research is that awe helps shift our focus from our narrow self-interest to the interests of the group to which we belong. They found that awe helps bind us to others, motivating us to act in collaborative ways that enable strong groups and cohesive communities. They found that even brief experiences of awe, such as being amid beautiful tall trees, will lead people to feel less narcissistic and entitled and more attuned to the common humanity people share with one another. And then they make this statement. They say that our culture today is awe-deprived. That we live in a state of awe deprivation, that we spend less time outdoors, we spend less time seeking out these moments, and they say that awe deprivation has had a hand in a broad societal shift that has been widely observed over the past 50 years. People have become more individualistic, more self-focused, more materialistic, and less connected to others. And they have a solution for this. They suggest that to reverse this trend, we should insist on experiencing more everyday awe. These men are not Christians. They're just giving you the facts about experiencing awe, that what it does is it takes someone who is focused on self and makes them begin to lift up their eyes and then have concern for others. Oh, interesting. Has anybody been to the Grand Canyon? Anybody? Okay. Yeah, I had wanted to go my whole life, finally got to go last spring break. Had been looking forward to it and had used it as an illustration for years, but had never actually seen it myself, which is a little hypocritical, but bear with me. And so I get out of the car with the kids and I walk up to the edge of the Grand Canyon and did what every single member of my family expected me to do. Stood there and sobbed. I just sobbed. And my son Matt had chosen to wear shorts in March to the Grand Canyon, and after about 10 minutes said he was ready to leave. I was not done feeling goosebumps. I made him stay for 7 hours. It was transcendent. It was magnificent. And I stood there and I understood a little of what is being talked about here in this article, because listen to me, no one, not the greatest narcissist in the world, not the agnostic, not the atheist, no one stands at the edge of the Grand Canyon and says, I am awesome. But do you know what else they don't stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and say? Do these yoga pants make my butt look big? Do you know what the Grand Canyon gives people an opportunity for? Self-forgetfulness. To look out at this vast and glorious display and understand that the world is big and that I am small. And that smallness is a good thing for me to grasp. Romans chapter 1 talks about these moments of awe when we look out at nature. It says these are the reasons that people stand before God guilty of not acknowledging him, because you should be able to stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and get the point that this didn't happen by accident, that all of this beauty has an origin and that origin is your origin and you owe it your worship. That moments of awe should drive us to the one who is worthy of our awe. Theologians call this natural revelation. It's when you look out at nature and you can see what is true about God. And natural revelation is where we see broad brushstrokes painting the nature and character of God for us. We can see those broad brushstrokes. But what if there were somewhere where we could see his character etched in fine tip pen? What if there were somewhere that we could get our daily dose of awe? Oh, hey, looky-loo. What we have in the Bible is just that. Now, I am about to make the most obvious statement that you will ever hear anyone say ever at a gathering like this. Are you ready for it? The Bible is a book about God. Anyone want to disagree? Now, I would say that I have always thought that for as long as I've had contact with the Bible. Yeah, the Bible is a book about God. Sure, yes, that is absolutely what I believe. But the problem that I began to realize the more I understood how to read the Bible was that even though I would have said that the Bible was a book about God, I actually read it as though it was a book about me. You know that story of Moses and the burning bush? Are you familiar with that story in Exodus chapter 3? It's where Moses has been very bad. He has killed an Egyptian, and now he is on the mountainside in Midian, and he has married Jethro's daughter, and he's herding sheep, which is actually going to turn out to be very great occupational training for how he's going to spend the next 40 years. And he looks over, and he sees that there is a bush that is on fire, and it is not consumed. And so he says, I will go over and see what is coming. Why is the bush not consumed? And so he walks over to the bush, and then the bush talks to him. And guess what it says? Says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Who is the bush? It's God. Okay. And so, has anybody in here ever said, if God would just tell me what to do, I would do it? Anyone? Anyone thinking about what job they're going to do, maybe what major they're going to study, where they're going to live next, what car they're going to buy, who they're going to marry, and have you said something like, God, just tell me, and I will do it? Well, I'm afraid you may be wrong, because what have we just heard? God tells Moses, I want you to go into Egypt and bring my people out of it. And what does Moses say? He says, oh, great, let's go. When do we leave? Thank you. You've clearly identified yourself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so I'm in. Let's go. No, what does he say? In chapter 3, verse 11, Moses responds to God's declaration of who he is and what he wants Moses to do with this. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And so God, because he is holy and just and seated enthroned between the cherubim, sends a lightning bolt down to strike the disobedient Moses and turn him into a black spot on the ground. No. God is long-suffering, and so he responds with this, I will go with you. And then Moses goes, great, let's go. Except that he doesn't. He comes back 2 verses later and says, who am I that they will listen to me? And God very patiently responds with, tell them, I am who I am has sent you. And Moses still doesn't get it. 3 more times he questions, who am I that they should believe me? Who am I with my slowness of speech? Who am I to do this? Please send someone else. Moses says, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Notice how God does not respond. He does not say, hey, Moses, hey, look right here. Look right at me. Look at Daddy. Now see, Moses, you are an Enneagram 3, and that is the achiever. And 3s want to be affirmed, and they want to distinguish themselves from others, to have attention, and they want to be admired and to impress others. And listen, Moses, when you're unhealthy, this is how you behave. You start caring more about how you appear to others than you should. But listen, when you're healthy, and we will get you there, you will develop yourself and contribute your abilities to the world and also enjoy motivating others to greater personal achievements like Joshua. Come on, buddy, come on. Is that what God says? No. In response to Moses' incessant questions of who am I, God faithfully keeps responding with, I am. He places himself back at the center of the narrative. Why? Because the success or failure of Moses' trip into Egypt in no way depends on who he is, and in every way depends on I am. Listen to me. The Bible is our burning bush. It is a faithful declaration of the nature and character of God. From Genesis to Revelation, it begins with in the beginning God, and it ends with God seated on a throne. And we come to it asking, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And all the time it is calling to us, I am. The Bible is a book about God. we should read it as such. We should read it first, asking what it says about who God is before we ask it to speak of who we are. The Bible is actually a book about you too, but only insofar as you understand yourself in relationship to God. So John Calvin says it this way: the knowledge of God and the knowledge of self always go hand in hand. There is no true knowledge of self apart from the knowledge of God. Do you believe me? So, are you a merciful person? You might say, yes, I am. I am a merciful person. I go out of my way to be merciful to others. And also, I have this ratty friend, Susan, and she is not merciful at all. And every time I look at Susan, I know that I am, in fact, merciful. And you might live a long, happy life as long as you can surround yourself with Susans along every measurable factor that you need to ask yourself whether you are or are not that thing. But what about when I come to the scriptures and I open them and I understand the infinite, wide mercy of God? And then I see myself in relation to that. And I understand my mercy in a different way, don't I? It should drive me to repentance. I should cry out to the Lord and say, Lord, make me merciful as you are merciful. But until I hold myself up to the mirror of God, I will not understand myself rightly. Not only that, I will not understand others rightly as well. Is it interesting to you that in the awe research, there was that relationship of, hey, if you will lift your eyes vertically, it will improve your horizontal relationships. Sound like anything in the Bible? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. Do you have relationship probs on the horizontal plane? Are you only trying to fix them by fixing the horizontal? Maybe you have an awe deficit. Maybe there's some self-forgetfulness. Maybe there is some conviction to be faced. The Bible is a book about God, and I believe we should read it as such. And so I propose that we turn to Psalm 139 and that we take it back from the coffee mugs and the Instagram squares and the bad t-shirts. And we try to read it as we should. If you have your Bible, you can turn there. Psalm 139. Now, the first tip that we have that this is actually not a psalm about your pants not fitting properly is found right under the heading, Psalm 139, to the choir master, a psalm of what? David, not Ann Voskamp. A psalm of David. It's written by a dude. Now, I want you to hear the way that this psalm is often read. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all together. And at this point, the teacher will stop and say, girl, you are known. Then in verse 5, you hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. And then she will say to you, girl, you are held. And so on, and so on. When David writes this psalm, as we find if we get to the part that no one ever talks about at women's events, where he says, oh, that you would slay the wicked, O men of blood, depart from me. It's kind of hard to decorate for that part, so we usually don't get to that. We would understand that he writes this psalm at a very difficult time in his life. He's facing very real adversaries, and he does not know what he is going to do. And so he starts by writing a psalm of a transcendent God. I want you to hear it the way David wrote it. Oh, Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you. For I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you. Psalm 139 is not a psalm about you fearfully and wonderfully made. It's about something better. It is about God, fearful and wonderful. Listen to what David enumerates here. Listen to what he is telling us. These are the deep truths of Scripture, and we should pay attention to them. He begins in verses 1 through 4 with what God knows. And what does he say that God knows? God knows everything. He knows our habits, he knows our thoughts, he knows our location, he knows our words, he knows everything all together. Theologians refer to this as his omniscience. How much knowledge does God have? God has all knowledge. Every single fact there can be, he has. I want to read this to you from A.W. Tozer because I cannot possibly do it better than he has. If I can find it on my phone. Oh, you know what? I have a time limit on how long I can look at things on my phone. Oh, there it is. You ready? Here is what God knows. God knows instantly and effortlessly all matter and all matters, all mind and every mind, all spirit and all spirits, all being and every being, all creaturehood and all creatures, every plurality and all pluralities, all law and every law, all relations, all causes, all thoughts, all mysteries, all enigmas, all feeling, all desires, every unuttered secret, all thrones and dominions, all personalities, all things visible and invisible, in heaven and in earth, motion, space, time, life, death, good, evil, heaven, and hell, all of it. And he knows it all simultaneously, and he knows it all perfectly. Why? Because at one time, God was God alone, and he spoke, and it all came into being. He knows all of it because he is its origin. He has learned none of it. God cannot learn. That's our job. That is a very big God. And we need that God seated on the throne. By comparison, how much do you know? Anyone in here dealing with a difficult situation and are not sure quite how it's going to work out, and you might be wondering, is this all going to happen the way that it should? I'm not sure that God knows what he's doing. Anyone got anything like that? Let's just say that this circle is the sum total of all of the facts that there are, and that God knows them all perfectly. And if I were to, of course it's a bad illustration because God's knowledge is infinite, and so there can be no border on the circle, but bear with me for the sake of the illustration. Now, if I were to call a volunteer up from the audience and ask you to draw a circle within this circle of how many facts you know, of all the facts that there are to know, how large of a circle would you draw? Just show me. You can do it with your finger. How big would you? You're like, I'm scared. I really don't want to. You're yelling at me and I'm scared. Most of us would be scared to even put the tiniest little dot on there, right? So in your difficult situation where you're wondering, how can this possibly all work out? Isn't it possible that outside of that tiny little dot that you would have drawn, that there is a fact, or maybe 2 facts, or maybe even 10 facts that might make perfect sense of what you're going through now that you're not aware of, but that God is? God knows all things. This is really good news for us because if you have ever thought, I wonder if God knows that thing that happened to me, the answer is yes. It should also give us pause when we intend to sin and tell ourselves no one will know, because he does know. And the right response to that, God, is awe. It is right reverence. You know Proverbs 31:30, that one we like to whack women over the head all the time with? Charm is deceitful and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Does that ever jump out and just sort of grab you? It doesn't say a woman who's just so in love with Jesus. It says a woman who fears the Lord, a woman who understands awe. Look at what David says next in verse 5. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. And we hear that, you lay your hand on me behind and before, and we're like, oh, it's a snuggle from Daddy God. He's giving me a little snuggle hug. But David is doing something very specific there. He says, you hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Do you see it? You are in the past, and you are in the future, and you are right here in the present too. God is eternal. He is not bound by time. And that is worthy of our awe and our worship. Anybody in here feel a little bound by time? God has never hurried. He has never been late. He has never been early. How about you? God cannot be overscheduled. He cannot be lazy. He does things at exactly the right time, and he has for all time, and he exists outside of time. That's worthy of our worship. The reason that he can deal with your past is because he is there right now. And the reason he does not fear your future is because he is there right now. And the reason that he commands you to live this day in the present very well is because you are not capable of being in the past and in the future. You are only capable of being here now. That is a limit that has been placed on you. He's also placed limits on your knowledge. He holds all knowledge and all facts, but you don't hold that many, as we just illustrated. Did you know what we do? Remember how Eve said, the serpent told Eve, if you eat the fruit, you will become like God. Didn't that ever hit you funny? Because earlier in Genesis, we were told that they were created in the image of God, male and female. They were actually already like God. So then what is the serpent offering when he says, if you eat the fruit, you will become like God? He's saying you will become like God in some way that God has said you are not to be. Anybody in here wish that they held all knowledge? You're like, no, that's dumb. Why would I want that? Oh, except that, do you have one of these? My husband and I used to have great arguments about who starred in what movies and what the lyrics were to 80s rock songs. Now it's just a race to see who can Google them the fastest. You don't think this is omniscience in your pocket? You don't think it appeals to you because it whispers exactly what was told to Eve? You will be like God. You don't think that when you try to cram more hours into the day, or when you tell yourself there will always be enough time for me to do X, Y, or Z, that you aren't saying, I am not bound by time, in a way that is saying, you will be like God. How about this? Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. In other words, the knowledge of God is something that David cannot even comprehend. And this is true. God is incomprehensible. He is not able to be fully known because he is infinite. So there are things that we can know about God that are disclosed to us here in the scriptures, and they are everything that is necessary for life and godliness. You will not reach the end of the worth of what this book has to say about God in this lifetime and probably in the next. But there are an infinite number of things that are true about God, and we are only able to understand them in part because we are limited humans. But whatever there is for us to learn about God. Do you like knowing people who have secrets? That's not a good feeling, is it? And I just told you that God has an infinite number of secrets that are kept from you in this life. But God has no skeletons in his closet because he is infinitely good, which means that whatever we do not know about him, when we find it out, it will only increase our affection and our worship. That's a pretty great thought to have. Worship leaders always think that heaven is going to be just this endless praise concert where we just sing all the time. And I just have to say, honestly, that doesn't sound great to me. It's fine. I'm hoping we can bless our uteri for eternity. No, I'm kidding. But do you know what the Bible teachers think that heaven's going to be? we think that it will be an ever unfolding opportunity to learn the infinite good character of God. And maybe sing a song here and there. Then David says in verse 7, where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? What's he going to talk about now? That God is everywhere fully present. He says, if I ascend to heaven, you are there. Let's do a little exercise. Where's heaven? Point to it. He doesn't mean angels floating around, by the way. He means the sky, the heavens. If I ascend to the heavens, you are there. So that's okay. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. Sheol is the grave. Where would the grave be? Point to it. Good, you're doing great. If I take the wings of the morning, okay, so where does the sun come up? In the east. So where's east from here? Anybody know? You're doing great. Let's just say it's over here. We can just say it's over here, okay? Now, what's the next part? Dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea. Where is the sea from here? Anybody? Yeah, we don't know. Okay. But who wrote this psalm? David, right? Where did David live? Anybody? Bible literacy? Jerusalem, good. Now, think about that map in the back of your Bible. Where is the sea relative? You're like, I don't look at those maps. Where is the sea relative to Jerusalem? It is west. Do you see what David just did there? You are high and you are low. You are east and you are west. You are darkness, light. You're in it all. I cannot escape your presence. And of course, he has no desire to. How about you? Can you be in more than one place at one time? Have you ever said, man, I just wish I could clone myself? I tell you what, I have a kid in Pittsburgh. I have 3.5 kids in College Station. I have a husband who just got back from the UK. Do you know what? I wanted to be in several places all at one time. FaceTime, right? We love that. FaceTime is great. It just does give you the illusion that you can be in more than one place at one time. Now, there's nothing wrong with FaceTime unless we actually think it's the same thing as, FaceTime. But we've come up with these ways to say, you will be like God. Oh, how about this? Have you noticed that your body means you can only be in one place at one time? Like that's the thing that is limiting you to one place at one time, which means that you will only ever be able to have a certain number of human relationships because it requires that you have physical proximity to someone to actually know them well. Now, God, on the other hand, because he is not bound by a body and is everywhere fully present, guess what? He can sustain deep and intimate relationship with an unlimited number of people. But here's an idea. What if we came up with a thing called social media so that we could feel like we could sustain an unlimited number of relationships with people who we're not actually physically present with? That would be amazing. Except that it isn't always, is it? Because there is no substitute for human relationship for us. God gave us a body for a reason. He gave us limits for a reason. And David seems to think that he is worthy of our worship because he is not like us. And he goes on to celebrate that God is the creator of life. He is self-existent. He talks about how he forms our inward parts and knits us together in our mother's wombs, how he does wondrous works. He is omnipotent. He goes on to talk about God's sovereignty and that he counts all of our days and writes them for us before they come to be. He talks about God being infinite when he talks about his thoughts being as numerous as the grains of sand. David has a vision of God high and lifted up, and it is devastating to him. Devastatingly beautiful, devastatingly powerful. He understands the power of awe, and his response in verse 19 is, "Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies." Well, that is awkward. Because what's the takeaway here? You should just go and kill all the people who are driving you nuts. No. David had real flesh and blood enemies. But what does Ephesians 6 tell us? That our battle, yours and mine on this side of the cross, is not against flesh and blood. Does that mean that we do not battle? Because I'll tell you something, this is another one of those pink Christian bubble messages that absolutely makes me insane. Girl, you just rest. Girl, you just stand still. The battle is the Lord's. That's Exodus, right? The problem with saying you have only to stand still and the Lord will fight for you is that 3 chapters later, God commands the children of Israel to fight. So how do we know when we're to stand still and when we're to fight? Well, I would say your circumstances are often requiring that you stand still because you can't change your circumstances. But when it comes to your enemies, you got to get up and fight. Not against flesh and blood. We have other enemies to put to death. Colossians 3:5 says, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passions, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry. Romans 8:13 says it this way, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. The Puritan John Owen says it this way, be killing sin, or sin will be killing you. What is our response to a vision of God high and lifted up? It reorients us. We understand ourselves rightly to be small before Him. And listen, it is devastating to us. And then we grow in our desire to wage holy war against anything that sets itself in opposition to God in our hearts. What does David say? He then reflects on this in verse 23. He says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. Do you remember how the psalm opened? O Lord, you have searched me and known me. What does David say? He expresses a desire that that process would continue. Try me and know my thoughts and see if there be any grievous way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. A vision of God high and lifted up rightly orients us. Don't you think this is the story of Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 6? He sees God high and lifted up. And what are the first words out of his mouth? Does he say, Abba, Daddy God, let me crawl up on your snuggle lap? No, what does he say? He says, woe is me. I'm undone. And he repents and the Lord raises him up to serve. How about Jesus and Peter? When they're in the boat, and Jesus has just given Peter some fishing instructions, and Peter doesn't take it super well. He's like, okay, I'll put the nets in on this side of the boat. And what happens? There's a miraculous catch of fish, and all of a sudden, Peter knows that what he thought was just a man in the boat with him is much more than that. And what is his reaction? Is it, come in here for a big hug? What happens? It says that he falls to his knees and he cries out, away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man. And what happens? He's raised up to continue in ministry. A vision of God high and lifted up will give us self-forgetfulness, and it will give us self-awareness, and it will rightly orient us. The Bible is a book about God. We should read it as such. We should read the Bible with more pressing concerns than the sanctifying of our uteri or the shoring up of our self-esteem. It would do us no harm to trade the message of I am enough for I am undone. You know, the truth is you're not enough. The good news of the gospel is not, girl, you've got this, you're enough. It's you're not enough, and you don't have to be, because Jesus is enough. And then what? We're raised to minister in that light. Because I cannot gain any lasting comfort in being told I am a daughter of the King if you do not first teach me to worship the King. The preciousness of that statement, and please hear me, it is a precious statement to be told, I am a daughter of the King. But its preciousness hinges on a vision of the King, seated on a throne. The gospel does not say, you are precious, that's why God loves you. The gospel says you are precious because God loves you. And so I ask you, does the Bible fix our self-esteem problems? Ultimately, yes. By rightly orienting us to the God of the universe in a way that causes us to tremble And then by showing us that that God, that transcendent God, reigning and ruling, has sought and bought relationship with us. Women of Breakaway, do not conform to the pattern of the pink Christian bubble, but be transformed by a vision of God high and lifted up. Lift up your eyes and behold your God. The Bible is a book about God. Read it looking first for what it says. It is true of him. Promise me that you will every day seek your daily dose of awe.